Ben Habib is with us. Hello, Ben. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Ben's a broadcaster and former deputy leader of Reform UK, and Theo Usherwood as well, the political commentator. Good to see you.
Very good morning to you.
Here in the studio. I'm afraid I have a pretty bad poker face and would not be a good spy. At all. I don't think the phone call is going to come from Ken McCallum to ask me to join MI5. And when Tom Tugendhat said the words intelligence and Prince Andrew don't really go in the same sentence, I think that's probably fair. But what do you make of this massive row? Because Suella Braverman leading calls for the suspect to be stripped of anonymity. We know a lot more now in regard to this story than we did yesterday. Ben, what's your take on it?
Well, if I were the Chinese Secret Service, it wouldn't be Prince Andrew that I'd be targeting for information. I'm sort of with Tom Tugendhat on that one. I can't imagine he's got anything worthwhile to contribute to China. So, I mean, I see it slightly as a bit of a storm in a teacup, frankly. I can't imagine that they
You're not concerned that there was a spy with, you know, the king's brother?
I don't think that Andrew is in possession of anything valuable.
But he could perhaps involve access to other people.
Yeah,
or,
but I mean,
business interests. They could blackmail him.
I mean, if we're talking about that, and that's a very good point to make, the entire British political establishment has been in bed with China for decades. Which is
what Tom Tugendhat was kind of worrying about and talking about.
You know, and you look at China. China's gone from strength to strength over the last 30 years. Aerial photographs of Shanghai, literally over 30 years, show it going from a fishing village to being the metropolis that Shanghai is now. And the story about China is the same. Its growth, its geopolitical power, all of that has come because we have opened ourselves in the West to Chinese goods, effectively. We've enriched China. We have made China the geopolitical threat that it is. So if we're going to get all fussed up about someone getting close to Prince Andrew, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to be concerned about, I suppose, if they're a spy, but we've got to look more closely at our entire relationship with China and how it is that we allowed ourselves to empower China so much to the threat to our own security.
There's a lot in that, isn't there, Theo?
Yes, absolutely. But I think, and I know Tom Tugendhat was making this a similar point, and I was in a briefing with Ken McCallum a couple of years ago, the Director General of MI5, when he said that basically what China tries to do is it tries to secure influence. And we're not talking about necessarily spying in a conventional James Bond sense of trying to extract pieces of crucial information that can then be passed back to the Communist Party in China. What we're talking about is influence, of trying to find their way into the Chinese Communist Party, trying to find its way into our royal family, into our leading businesses, into our parliament.
And that in itself is, to me, the more worrying bit, because I agree with Ben when he said, well, Prince Andrew, really, what does he know? But then you think, hold on a second, these are the lengths that the Chinese state will go with someone who actually doesn't have that much influence. Yes, he's at the top of the establishment, he's the king's brother, but nonetheless, if that's the length they'll go to with that person, what lengths will they go to with people who really have influence?
But what they also do is they start very early. So what the Chinese will do is they will try and find people who they think are going to go on to successful careers, and they will invest in them with cultural trips to China, with support for their career as well. And then the hope is that enough of them, they appreciate that not all of them are going to get to the very top of their respective industries or careers or whatever, but they hope that enough of them find themselves in 20, 30 years' time at the very heart of the establishments and in positions of immense power, and then they can influence them.
That patience is quite worrying, isn't it? The long game, the investment, the time, the money, the effort. I mean, that is pretty concerning. Yeah,
and we've also gone to the extent of allowing them to get into our infrastructure. Do you remember Theresa May was going to give them the mandate to build a nuclear power station?
Yes.
Boris Johnson was going to allow them Huawei technology to run our 5G systems. Yeah. And we are busy buying Chinese electronic vehicles, you know, hand over fist at the moment. And all of this empowers China.
There are worries with the fact that in theory, those vehicles could be brought to a standstill by China.
And actually spy. You know, all of these things have the ability to listen. I was reading an article this morning, funny enough, which was espousing the view that our kitchen appliances are listening to us.
Yeah.
Invading our privacy.
Well, listen, I know that there are certain senior politicians who do not have the kind of devices, the sort of, you know, Google Play, what's the Google one?
Alexa one, yeah.
And so on. I have the Alexa one, and maybe I shouldn't.
She often pipes up when you're not even talking to her. Has that happened to you?
Well, indeed. And also when you hear things on the radio, like sort of Alexa play talk radio, for example. I don't know, might happen. Listen, well, let's get, perhaps we can talk to Jamie in a second, who's given us a ring about this. We'll get him on the line. But it's very interesting that there are quite a few people getting in touch about this. And Sheila Braverman has said the suspect should be stripped of his anonymity. What do you think about that, Theo?
I think it's, and I know there may be moves as early as next week to strip this individual of his anonymity. I think light is the best form of disinfectant in cases like this. And actually, that if by you remove the anonymity, then I think everybody understands who this individual is. We can then potentially have a case. You know, business leaders might try and come forward and say, "Hang on a moment,
I've been in touch with this person as well."
Touch with this person.
Well,
we can get a much more detailed picture about the extent of the influence of this particular individual. And I also think it will act as a deterrent to anybody else who thinks of inveigling themselves in trying to secure influence for the Chinese government, or indeed any other government in this country, that actually, if you do so, then your anonymity would be exposed. But I would say that the onus for doing this, and I'm not completely across the details about why this individual's anonymity are protected, but it must be done in conjunction with our security services. Yeah. They must be completely happy that this is a forward step.
There were two judges who said that the individual H6, as we know, there's an injunction on his name. I don't know his name. If I did, I couldn't tell you legally anyway, even if I did know it. But the identity has remained secret after he challenged the decision by two judges that he should be named. The two judges for the Special Immigration Appeals Commission had ruled that the Home Office was justified to bar the alleged spy, known only as H6, to protect national security. Well, if
it's for national security, then I would just say let MI5, let the security services and the Home Office take the lead. If they've got a decision that actually they don't want this individual's name to be released, I think that needs to be respected.
Let's talk to Jamie in Newcastle. Jamie has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Jamie, first call of the day on this show. You're on with me and also Ben and Theo. What are your thoughts this morning?
Yeah, I think, Andrew was proven, Prince Andrew was proven his ability to choose friends and associates and stuff like that to be questionable in every aspect of his life. But there's one thing you said before, Peter, with regards to, government officials meeting these people and them people and that they're all vetted and that it's all. Boris Johnson didn't. Boris Johnson had a private meeting with no aids whatsoever with a former KGB officer and put his son into our House of Lords. That's never talked about. Boris Johnson's dad was a spy for the UK.
Well,
if anyone knows about espionage and all that sort of stuff, Boris Johnson crossed that line in my view, having that private meeting, and on the back of it, his son goes into our House of Lords.
Yeah, well, you're talking about Yevgeny Lebedev, who is now a member of the House of Lords, and there are a lot of people who raise concerns, including the security services at the time, Jamie. So you're right.
I buried it.
Well, listen, we're talking about it now, and there's certainly all sorts of issues in regard to that. Now, certainly, Yevgeny Lebedev is not a spy, and there's no suggestion that he is, and he would deny, of course, that he is. In fact, he's been very anti-Putin in many regards, in many of the things he's said and done. But, Jamie, you're right. There are a lot of very senior people from foreign regimes, and we need to be really careful about how we allow them to have influence, if they have any influence, on our society.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, Jamie, thanks for your call. Really appreciate that. Sharon says, I can't understand why they're protecting this individual. And a question from Spike, who has said, did you say MFI? It's MI5. No, I definitely said MI5, the now defunct kitchen brand. I think it's now, I don't think MFI exists anymore, does it?
I don't know. I haven't seen one recently.
I think it's gone. But we are actually asking the question whether the UK has enough builders for Labour's 1.5 million homes, and we'll talk about that next. This person texts in, curious text, I'm not quite sure what's behind it. If you want to text me again to tell me more thoughts on it, whoever this person is, I haven't put their name. So there's a China spy, but we can't know his name, and everybody pushing the story are well-established liars. I smell a Westminster-sized rat. Well, there is an alleged spy by China, certainly. We can't know his name for legal reasons. That's what the courts have decided. Everybody pushing the story, well-established liars. Well, no, it's everybody. It's just a story. We're talking about it. The more mainstream media. I don't think we're not mainstream media. I don't know what I think, but essentially, it is a massive story. We're talking about Prince Andrew is involved. So I don't really agree with your message, but by all means, if you want to clarify or challenge what I'm saying, text me again. 87222 is the number. MI5 now investigating Prince Andrew's cash. And just as a final thought on this from Ben and Theo, there are questions, of course, and we know that the royal family, the establishment itself, King Charles essentially cannot say, there's no mechanism for him to say to Andrew and his people, where does your money come from? Because he's not a working royal anymore. Surely that's a worrying thing, Ben.
And it's always worrying, I think, when people are hard up. In positions of authority and power, influence, and they're hard up.
Desperate people do desperate things.
Desperate people do desperate things. But do you remember Prince Charles got a briefcase with €3 million in it from the Qatari government?
Yes.
And no one seems to ask any questions about that. Why would you need €3 million in cash?
I wish someone would give me a briefcase with that amount of money, or make a TUV-sized donation. Feel free.
What I donate to the TUV?
Well, you can donate it to me. You're more than welcome to do so. Sorry, Ben. That's a reference to Ben's political donation.
And the Qataris, I think, also managed to get their mitts on a number of MEPs, didn't they?
That's right.
They lobbied them with cash, if that's the way to put it. I mean, this sort of thing is prevalent right across the globe, and we've got to make sure that our political overlords don't dabble in it, and we keep an eye on it. Hasn't H6 been deported?
I think so, yes.
So, it is curious that
I think he's gone, but we can't name him for some reason.
It's funny because he's been deported. He's a Chinese citizen. I can't see how it would prejudice the case, but anyway.
We shall see. Certainly the Special Immigration Appeals Commission has ruled the Home Office was justified to bar him and to protect national security. Should say as well, someone was questioning whether we can say Stanley Johnson is a spy. He's written about it. It was a short-lived career in MI6, and we were just doing a bit of Googling during the break there, and there was an article in the Mail on Sunday a few years ago, Confessions of a Bumbling Bond. Think Richard Whiteley was an unlikely 007. He's got nothing on me, says Stanley Johnson, whose son Boris, of course, at the time was Foreign Secretary and in charge of MI6. Right, let's talk about a few other issues here. Britain's poshest migrant hotel. Theo, perhaps you could give us some detail on this one.
This is Madeley Court. It's in Shropshire, and it's from all accounts, it wasn't a particularly successful hotel. Going by the story, it had some poor reviews, but it's now effectively closed to the public, and it's a migrant hotel. We know that the bill for migrant hotels has soared in recent years. It's now standing, I think, at more than £8 million a day, because, of course, the boats carrying small migrants have continued to cross the English Channel, and there is nowhere other than these hotels for the government to put them. They, by all accounts from the Mail story, they are very comfortable in this. The migrants who are staying there are very comfortable in this hotel, and it's not open to the public now, but it is being used by the Home Office to house these migrants.
And it's a wonderful-looking hotel.
It's incredible.
Yeah, give us some of the detail.
It's got a turret.
It's got four-poster beds.
Four-poster beds, and so forth. So it's a very. I think it's going by the reviews. I think it's had better days, but it's still quite an austere.
And Ben, this is the fairness point at the heart of all this. There will be the processing scandal is the biggest scandal, I think, in all of the things about small boats and immigrants and illegal immigration. But the point is, we're talking a little bit later on about people charging guests £200 a head for Christmas dinner, and we're asking you at home whether you would charge people for Christmas dinner. But we'll get to that. But the point is that there are a lot of people who will know Madeley Court. Madeley Court? Yeah. They will know Madeley Court. They'll be aware of it. They'll know other hotels, and they'll think, do you know what, I couldn't afford to go there for Christmas dinner, or for even, Father's Day, or a meal, or for a birthday or something. Or maybe that's a once-a-year thing that people do. Or maybe it's something that they think, right, that's a nice local hotel, maybe, as a treat, as a special anniversary or something, we'll do, 2 or 3 nights there. But actually, these are people who have contributed nothing to this country, who have come in, who are getting the kind of treatment that many pensioners this winter can only dream of, because they're losing the winter fuel allowances. Yet there are people in this hotel, and many others, who will have 3 meals a day, plenty of heat, light, power for their devices and their mobile phones and all the rest of it. And we are factually treating illegal immigrants better than we treated our pensioners.
Better than we treat British citizens, absolutely. And the average cost, this is the thing that we've got to understand. The average cost to the Exchequer of an illegal migrant per year is around £50,000. Now, for a British citizen to earn £50,000 per annum net in their pocket, they'd have to be on a salary which basically takes them into the top 5% of earners in the United Kingdom. Just think about that. To afford what they've got, you would need to earn something close to £90,000 a year, which puts you in the top 5% of British earners. That's what we're paying on illegal migrants. The French pay £5,000 per annum. Of course,
no wonder they want to come from France to the UK.
No wonder. There's a £45,000 pickup net in their pockets. Food, shelter, clothing, healthcare, dentistry, cash in their back pocket, iPads, translators.
There's so many things, so many stories I cover in this station that just simply come down to the issue of fairness. It's not racist to talk about this. It's not a bad thing. It's not something you can't talk about. It's something that is a legitimate discussion. And if you want to give us a shout, 0344 499
Can I just say one thing? Just add one thing to that. If you're one of these illegal migrants in Madeley Court and you send photographs of that back to Afghanistan, I think they're from Iraq, most of these people.
Yeah, it's a pull factor.
It's a massive pull factor. Yeah. Look at us. We've made it to the UK. We're living in a castle.
Yeah.
And they'll think, my goodness, let's all go for this journey.
And they'll be thinking, you're right, it's a pull factor, Theo. Why don't we come too?
Yes, that's the problem with this, is these stories, you know, and at the same time as this is a particular hotel, there are hotels which are not on the scale of Madeley Court, but it is the pull factor, and that's, you have to ask the question, why Britain? Why have we got this particular issue? And I know that Germany's got a similar problem, but actually per head, I think we're one of the highest in terms of the cost. And it's the pull factor of coming to this country, and that's something that the Conservatives tried to deal with the Rwanda scheme. They couldn't deal with it in terms of actually getting the planes off the ground because they couldn't get the legislation through in terms of the changes that needed to be made, and there's also a question about whether those changes would have made any difference. Yeah. Ultimately, it came down to our membership of the ECHR, our decision of signing up to the ECHR, and that's the problem. That actually the Rwanda scheme could only act as a deterrent. It did actually go somewhere in terms of reducing the numbers from 45,000 to 29,000. Keir Starmer comes in, gets rid of that deterrent, second day in office, and now we're at past 33,000 for the year, 20,000 on Labour's watch. So clearly something needs to be done.
Well, we're going to talk more about Brussels. Its demand as well that the UK surrenders fishing rights and follows EU rules. I'm particularly looking forward to Ben's thoughts on this. I don't think he's going to miss and hit the wall. And we're also going to ask whether the UK has enough builders to build the 1.5 million homes that Angela Rayner, the Housing Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, wants us to. Stay with us here on Talk. Helen has been in touch from Birmingham. She says, I work near Madeley Court Hotel, the hotel we're talking about that asylum seekers are staying in. I've stayed there because we had our office Christmas party there. It was a lovely hotel, and it's sad what's happened. So Helen has been in touch, so thank you to her. Rachel says, good morning, Peter. Absolutely love Ben Habib, which was my local MP. So thank you to Rachel. And Sharon in Staffordshire says, the Conservative Party did not work hard enough to stop these people coming here illegally. Sue in Macclesfield says, the migrant hotel business makes me sick. My sister runs a cleaning company, has a lot of elderly clients who can't afford to heat their homes, and as for Christmas, she has hired a kitchen to cook over 170 Christmas dinners as well as gifts. It's so sad. Why doesn't this government put British people first? Merry Christmas, says Sue from Macclesfield. Merry Christmas to you as well, Sue. Speaking of builders as well, we'll come to that in a second, but Sharon says, why can't we pay £5,000 like France? I think this is too much to pay anyway. Penny in Essex says, I've heard it all now. A migrant hotel is a disgrace. I'm furious, as will the majority of people be, yet they've done nothing for the UK, yet are treated better than us. I am livid. Another person says, this is a joke at taxpayers' expense. We are putting up illegal immigrants in posh hotels. No wonder they're all coming. I would, wouldn't you? Thank you also, and apologies to Jerry in Brentford, who says, cheers, Peter, I'm watching you on my TV, on YouTube, and you started my Alexa. I do apologise for that, Jezza, although I realise by saying the word of your connected device, I may have started it up again. So listen, you can watch and listen. I would imagine there'd be a very slight delay between the two, but it does illustrate the point that 3/4 of homes actually have a smart TV. If you have a smart TV, you can watch us and go to the Talk app and find us there. You can also watch us on YouTube or however you do that. Ben Habib is still with us, and Theo Usherwood as well. Let's talk a little bit about Brussels demanding the UK surrenders fishing rights and follows EU rules. Ben, just take us through this story.
So this is Keir Starmer doing what he said he would do if he became Prime Minister, which is take the United Kingdom as closely to the EU as he possibly can. He sees some virtue in hooking our economic hip to the EU sclerotic, imploding economy. You know, France is nearly bust. Germany's having a cardiac arrest in its transition.
Have you noticed his language has changed recently in terms of growth in the UK? It says we want to be the fastest growing nation in Europe rather than the fastest growing in the G7, which is very different.
Which is the least recessionary country, I think he's going to be next saying, because we are now 2 quarters of negative growth, or, you know, shrinking in our economy.
Sort of like, let's be the tallest member of Snow White's household.
Yes, exactly. So this is Starmer trying to get us closer to the EU from a trading perspective, and in return the EU is demanding certain things, including aligning on sanitary and phytosanitary regulations.
That's to do with food standards.
That's to do with animals, plants, and actually to some extent humans as well, travel of humans, so that we align with their regulations. And tied up in all of that, funnily enough, is obviously fishing, but also Northern Ireland, because, you know, one of the big problems with the Northern Ireland Protocol, the Windsor Framework, as it's now called, is the requirement for Northern Ireland to comply with EU regulations on animals and plants, which has removed Northern Ireland from the United Kingdom as far as that trade is concerned, so we've got a border down the Irish Sea. And if we were to align with the EU in SPS regulations, then the Irish Sea border would be less visible. But, of course, what you're doing in aligning with the EU on SPS regulations is giving up self-determination, number one, as a country. We would be taking orders from the European Union on how we govern our own animals and plant, and it would prohibit us. We would also be subject to European Court of Justice rulings, so a foreign court would be deciding disputes in the United Kingdom, which I think is abhorrent for a country that's meant to be sovereign. And the last thing that we would do is seriously hamper our ability to do trade deals with other countries, because we would have a backdoor effectively to the EU through these regulations. It would, for example, make a trade deal with the United States complicated, or impossible, probably. And fishing is in the crosshairs of the article this morning, but it's a much, much broader subject. And fishing, of course, was never really recovered by Boris Johnson. Do you remember? They used the fishing argument to win the vote in 2016. They absolutely banged the drum for the fishing industry. But the deal that they did handed over very significant parts of our fishing industry to the EU. We never got it back, and this would be a further step away from sovereignty over our own waters.
Theo, your own thoughts?
Just to pick up on what Ben's saying, I mean, in terms of the closer regulations and following EU rules, this is all something that Starmer wants.
Absolutely. It is what he wants.
He wants, what he's trying to get to is, you know, in terms of securing economic growth, he had two planks of it, right? First is house building. We're going to come on to discuss that in a moment. The second is a much closer, and this is, you know, at the behest of many businesses, which of course rely, they say they rely on close links with the European Union. He wants to basically do away with the bureaucracy that is currently in place, imposed by the European Union, which businesses in this country say prohibits, you know, just-in-time manufacturing, speedy trade between mainland Great Britain and the European Union. So Keir Starmer wants all of the things that Ben has just been talking about. The flip, what it is going to really ask for in return, and this is where it's going to become very messy for the Prime Minister and potentially very difficult to actually get to a point where he's got something that he can implement, is they're going to be asking for a youth mobility scheme. Yeah. They want to see, you know, they're in the European Union's view, there are 4 pillars to the whole project, and two of the most important pillars. Firstly is free movement of goods and services. That's what Keir Starmer wants, and we don't have at the moment, although we don't have tariffs in place. But the other one is free movement of people. And the idea from the European Union's view is that you can't have one of the 4, 2 of the 4. You've got to have all 4 of the 4 in order to access the single market and the customs union. And that's what Keir Starmer, I think, is going to find it very difficult to get over the line, because, of course, there is going to be huge opposition to anybody, when we think about reform and the Conservatives, to anything that looks to weaken freedom of movement.
Yeah. I was at a Christmas party in Dublin a few years ago when I was a special advisor in the Northern Ireland office during a particularly tricky time when it came to Brexit, as the Theresa May years were trying to get a deal. And someone asked me a really detailed question I couldn't really answer on trade and the movement of goods and services. And it was a big party, and there was a man dressed as Santa Claus. And then the man dressed as Santa Claus came and stood beside us, and I said, well, let's talk to an expert in just-in-time supply chains. I was quite proud of that one. I thought that was terrible. It wasn't a bad line. Let's talk about the UK not having enough builders for Labour's 1.5 million homes. Angela Rayner is the Housing Secretary. Theo, maybe you could take this one for us, because growth through house building is the big one. But what happens if we don't have enough construction workers? The government says it's taking steps to rectify the problems. But, I mean, how do you do that?
The problem in this country is we haven't invested enough in ensuring that young people coming out of schools have the technical skills. There's been too much of a focus on university over the last 10, 15 years. And actually, what we needed to be investing is in young people coming out of school.
I was at 25 years. Once again, it's all Tony Blair's fault.
Coming out, yeah.
Agreed.
Sure, agree. That was the aim, to get 50% of kids going into university.
Insane.
But from 14 onwards, making sure they've got the skills, whether it be plumbers, whether it be builders, electricians, so that by the time they can leave school at 16 with a decent apprenticeship and then take these jobs that are going to build these homes. And we haven't had that investment. And I feel for those young people, because they've always been seen, technical skills, vocational skills have always been second-class citizens to those kids who go to university. And actually, those are the people we need. And it's not just in terms of house building. I was talking to the boss of LinkedIn back in October, and she was saying there was a huge problem coming down, in terms of, the government wanting to get to its net zero targets. Let's just put net zeros. It's not going to happen, but let's just say for a moment it was going to happen, and the government, are going to get to their net zero targets. Well, where are the young men and women who can insulate homes, who can fit the solar panels, who can do all of the work, and they just don't exist in our workforce right now. So it's all very well having the grand ambitions, the big targets, the 1.5 million homes that are going to be built over the next 5 years, or net zero by 2030. But you've got to be able to back that up, looking at who is going to actually do that work to build those homes and to fit those solar panels. And at the moment, there's a dearth in the labour market of people with the right skills, and Labour doesn't have a plan necessarily.
Will their plan be to bring in construction workers through immigration, Ben?
I mean, frankly, they're not going to build 1.5 million homes over this Parliament. They're just not going to be able to do it. Even when all regulatory caution, was thrown to the wind after World War II, the most we could build was about 300,000 homes a year. And now Keir Starmer declared that he wouldn't give the climate more importance than building homes for British citizens to live in. But actually, if you read the new National Planning Policy Framework, which came out, it's inundated with references to sustainability, climate change, making sure trees are protected, making sure that noise insulation takes place, homes are net zero compliant, etc., etc., etc. These are massive burdens that would have to be carried in the process of building these homes, all of which create an impediment. You can't get to these targets unless you not just deregulate planning, but also deregulate the regulations associated with what you're building. For example, we could repurpose many town centres if you remove the net zero requirement on homes. Yeah. Because town centre buildings, historic buildings, simply can never comply with the net zero requirements. They'll never get there. So they lie redundant, eventually being required to be knocked down. Yeah.
Which in itself is
massively carbon
by itself.
Absolutely.
We just have a couple of minutes left, and I want to ask both Ben and Theo whether they will be charging people for their Christmas dinner. Apparently there's a woman called Carla Bellucci, who's 42, from Hitchin in Hertfordshire. It's a really nice town, actually. I've been there a number of times. She plans to charge her 6 guests £200 each on Christmas Day to help pay for a private chef and multiple bottles of Dom Perignon champagne. If Carla, I'm afraid, tried to charge me £200 in Hertfordshire, I'd tell her to be hitching a ride, I'm afraid. There are people who've been asked to pay 17 per head towards the cost of the meal, £20 a head. I mean, Theo, if you have people over for Christmas...
You only get, for £200 a head, you only get butternut squash soup.
No, but you get DP, Dom Perignon champagne. I mean, I think it's cheap at the price, £200.
Okay. Well, I mean, charging guests, I mean, what do you think about that, Ben?
Well, I think culturally, we've had Christmas is a time to give, and when you go to your relatives for Christmas, you often take with you a Christmas pudding or mince pies or the stuffing that if you go early on, bottle of wine, champagne. So I mean, we've done this anyway. We're just monetizing it now.
It's a bit much.
I'm with Ben. I think it's just a question. I would always want to. I wouldn't want to go to a place where I'm going to be charged £200 a head. You can kind of get it, but isn't it that idea of bringing something instead?
You bring something with you.
You bring the Christmas pudding, or you bring.
But on a more serious note, there will be a lot of people who will be feel under a lot of pressure to do everything properly and to have the huge turkey and all the trimmings and all the rest of it, and maybe actually contributing something, maybe not through money, but certainly bringing something. I'll make a starter. I'll bring the Christmas pudding. That's a good idea. Isn't it?
I completely agree with you, and I think if we're all coming together as a family, families right up and down the country, many of your listeners will be struggling this Christmas. It's not been an easy year financially for many people, and I think actually, just you can do it without necessarily, what are you going to have next? A card machine at the front door?
Exactly.
Just tap.
Sorry, your card's been refused. You can't come in. I'd have Christmas down the road. Where will you be spending Christmas, Ben?
At home. I've got my parents with me. Looking forward to that.
Very nice. And you, Theo?
And with family, yes.
Very nice, very nice. Have a lovely Christmas to you both, and thank you both for coming in.